So, you doing good today? Doing good, Deacon Greg over there. So I want to talk to us tonight about carnal nature. And we're going to hop over throughout the Word of God. But I want to rest my hat tonight about doing things God's way isn't always comfortable to how we're used to living. Doing things God's way is not always comfortable to how we're used to living. And so I can go back into the book of Exodus around Exodus 12, verse 28 through 30. And we've been here and we talked about the Israelites and when they were in bondage for 400 plus years. They had really immersed themselves into Egyptian culture, as we've learned. And we heard about that night called Passover, when the Father gave the Israelites instructions about what was about to happen. And there would be something that would happen in the land. It had already been foretold by Moses, who prepared the Israelites. And in Exodus 22, verse 28 through 30, Moses told them there was something that was about to happen. But God gave us enough forewarning that you got to protect yourself. You got to get in position to do what God says. Now, here's the thing for the Israelites. Being in bondage, being in slavery, God tells them, when you get off for the day, go into your homes in the night, shut your doors, kill the lamb so that you can put blood on the doorpost. Do all of these things and don't come out. Please understand that the Israelites had grown accustomed to being in bondage. So their day went like this. They got up early in the morning and they worked all day long. They were in bondage. They were Hebrew slaves to Egypt. They were building massive structures and so forth. So everything they did during the day was about serving someone else. It was about serving a system that they worked for in bondage. And when the night fell, they really had time on their own. They were able to do what they wanted to do. They were able to go into their houses. They were able to mingle amongst themselves because the work had ended for that day. But they still were under an oppressive system. So the only time they had to truly do what they wanted to do was in the evening time. Lo and behold, Moses comes and tells them, there's some stuff that's about to happen in the land. And God has told me to tell you to protect yourselves. He's given me instructions for each one of you to go into your house in the evening time and make sure you don't come out. It was that night that God promised would happen in the land of Egypt. The death angel would come across the land and he would wipe out anyone who did not hear his instructions and obey his instructions. He was specific about sending it in for the Egyptians. But if the people of Israel did not listen to what God said for them to do, which was to give up the evening, something that you for a long time have not had to do, and go inside your house. See, carnal nature, it doesn't want anyone to tell us what to do. Romans 8:7 says, carnal nature is enmity against God, for it cannot please God. It does not understand the things of God. So carnal nature says, I don't want nobody to tell me what to do. And in my free time, I should be able to do what I want to do. I should be able to live my life the way I want to live. I should be able to go and mingle with other Hebrews in other houses, because this is the only time I have. I have to work during the day. I'm beat down by the Egyptians to build their stuff. And you mean to tell me the only time that I cannot go out is the time that is my free time? They had to do it. They had to do it. I could just hear some people today. What do you mean I got to give up something that's free? What do you mean I gotta sacrifice? See, carnal nature doesn't want anybody to tell us what to do. We want to live the way we want to live. We don't want God to tell us nothing. So there's a consequence. if the Hebrews did not hear and do what God said, because it violated their freedom to do what they wanted to do in the evening time, they would be just like the Egyptians. They would experience what was coming into the land. So how do the Israelites respond? Because, the Israelites have not heard from God. We've learned that for a long time. And here you have Moses, and there's things in the earth that's going on. And Moses says to them, hey, you got to give up your night. You got to give up your night. I know that you've been working all day. I know that your evening time is for you to unwind, and this is the only time you get to intermingle with people who are just like you. I know, but you got to do this. You got to give it up. For this moment, you got to give it up. Because here's what's about to happen. God is going to set us free, but there's going to be some pain in the land. And if you don't listen to what I'm saying, you will suffer just like the Egyptians. So what do they do in Exodus 12, verse 28 through 20? The Israelites did just what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord did what he promised. He struck down all the firstborn in Egypt. We heard that, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. There was not a house in Egypt without someone dead. But God's house was sustained for those who followed the instructions and did what they needed to do to protect themselves. Not only did they do that, they made sure other folks in the house didn't go outside. That's what I call wisdom, brothers and sisters. But let me tell you something about carnal nature. Carnal nature will have you say, you know what, Moses, I hear you. I see some things. But I can't have you telling me I got to give up this, because this is the only time that I have to really be free. You mean I got to give up this to be free? Moses, you crazy. I don't want to do that. See, that's what carnal nature will do, because it will have you think that you're going to lose out on something because you got to sacrifice for the moment. But in sacrificing for the moment, the Israelites were set free. Some people are not willing to sacrifice for the moment, so they're held in bondage for a lifetime. If any of the Israelites refuse to sacrifice for that night, evening where they're used to going to and from and intermingling with others, because that's the only time they have to do that, if they were unwilling to give up that and continued on despite the instructions from God, they would have been impacted just like the Egyptians. And that's what carnal nature wants us to do. Carnal nature does not know the things of God. It cannot please God. It wants us to be impacted like the Egyptians. Carnal nature says, don't sacrifice anything. Look out for yourself. This is your freedom you're talking about. Don't give up that one night. But if they had given up and did not give up that one night, woe to them. Brothers and sisters, carnal nature makes you fragile, because you lean on your own understanding, and the Word of God tells us to lean not, in Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6, on our own understanding. And in all thy ways acknowledge him, for he shall direct our path. Brothers and sisters, the manifestation of our faith requires us to do some work. The work is, if I see you're hungry, I'm not just going to pray for you. If I have bread, I'm going to give you bread. I can't sit here and say I'm going to lean on what the Word says about you being blessed and pray for you if I got a loaf of bread in my house. There's always works to do. And for the Israelites in that evening, yes, God is supernatural. God is all powerful. And yes, God could have said, y'all continue to do what you want to do in the evening time while I take out the Egyptians. But I wanted to test your faith and wanted to see if you were going to work your faith out. Trust me in what I said and do what I said, which required you to walk into your house and shut the door. Brothers and sisters, I'm afraid some of you are not shutting the door. You're saying, God got me covered, and you're letting stuff right on in. If you were there that night, that one night, for the Egyptians and the Israelites, the Egyptians continued to do what they were going to do. And look what they got. Are you going to follow the Egyptian system, which is a Babylonian system, or are you going to follow the system that's kingdom? God says through his son, Matthew 6:33, to seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all those things should be added unto you. You got to seek him first, not the system that you live in. For the Israelites, they were in a system in bondage, and they were being crushed. And the only time they had the chance to rest was in the evening time. The only time they had an opportunity to have some semblance of normalcy was in the evening time. Why didn't God tell them to stay at home that day so you didn't have to work? See, God kept everything normal. He kept everything normal because he knew that if he had had the Israelites not honor what they were supposed to do, there would have been a whole lot of stuff happening. He wanted people to walk out there free. And so he said, stay in your house in the evening time. I can hear some people today, I'm not staying in my house in the evening time. I'm just going to trust God. My faith is going to help set me free and keep me safe from the death angel. I could hear them if they were placed back in that time in Egypt with the Israelites, and they were Israelite, and they decided that they didn't want to hear what Moses said. They didn't want to do what Moses said because they chose to have faith in God but not move in what God said. That's foolish. On that night, it was a silent night. The land, it was calm. There was a death silence. The Israelites had never heard or seen anything like this before. The only thing they had ever seen was their brothers and sisters dying at the hands of Egyptians. They had never really seen this generation God intervened in such a way like this. They had never seen something come through the land that was going to take out their oppressors. They had never seen that before. So I can understand if they said, I don't know, Moses. I don't know about what you're talking about. I have never seen that before. Maybe this is a way for you to get me in isolation so you can take me out. Moses, I understand your intent, but I just know that we're stronger when we're amongst each other. We're stronger when we're able to do what we want to do. I don't know, Moses. I don't know what you're talking about because I've never seen what you said is about to happen before. I've never heard it. I've never seen it. So I don't know if I believe it. And you're telling me I got to give up my evening. Is that what we have become today, brothers and sisters? Just because we haven't experienced this before, we think it's not real. His blood covers, but his blood gives us wisdom. In the Word of God, it says faith without works is dead. The manifestation of our faith walk is our ability to trust God and do what he says, just like the Israelites did back on that night. They went inside their houses, and I could see them taking some blood of the lamb and making sure it's marked on the doorpost. Who does that? We haven't had to do that before. That seems foolish. You're trying to control me. You're trying to tell me what to do. The only way I fight is when I fight with my fist. But 2 Corinthians 10 verses 4 and 5 says, I don't fight with my fists, for my weapons of warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God, the blood, to the pulling down of strongholds. Yes, Egypt, you may have oppressed me. Yes, Egypt, you may have had the upper hand on me. I won't have to lift a hand, a finger to take you out. All I got to do is obey God, and he'll do the rest. Obeying God is the work. It's the work. Well, what is the work of the Father for us in this time? To love God with all our heart, all our body, all our mind, all our soul, and to love thy neighbor as thyself. Upon those two rest all of the law and the prophets. Those are the greatest two commands. If you can't do those, you can't do others. And guess what? You need grace to be able to do it, because without my grace, you'll be looking out for yourself. Brothers and sisters, he says in Romans 8, 1 through 10, what life in the Spirit is and what life in carnal nature looks like. And guess what happens? Life in the Spirit leads to life. Life in carnal nature leads to death. Carnal nature will lead to fragility, a mindset that is fearing everything and believes everything people tell you to make you even scared, more scared. But life in the Spirit trusts God in all things, follows God in what he says, follows the Son, because the Son is the truth, the way, and the life. He says there's always going to be things trying to take you out, but there's some things I'm going to give you to do right now to overcome those things. But if you don't want to do the work to overcome, and it's all about yourself, you'll be just like the Egyptians. That's what we see on that night in Egypt. You see people who are on one accord. The Bible doesn't ever say that they were not on one accord. The Bible did not say that there was somebody who was in disagreement. Those who heard the instructions of the prophet Moses obeyed. And they all came out of Egypt with something. Everybody had something. It was so powerful because they obeyed God's instructions. You thought God was taking something away from you. But no, God took your evening away from you, believer, so that he can give you a lifetime. And he says, I've come to give you life in John 10 and 10 so that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I'm going to give you some stuff, but I don't want you to worship the stuff. I want you to follow my commands, follow my instructions in that moment. Lean on my wisdom, brothers and sisters, to guide you. They leaned on the wisdom of God. They leaned on the wisdom of God through the prophet Moses, who told them what to do on that night. And while it might have been a sacrifice to give up that night, the payout was amazing. God had given them so much favor with the Egyptians that even the Egyptians, who had all the wealth, gave them stuff as they got ready to leave Egypt. So that night of sacrifice, that moment in time, led to an abundance. But if you're only focused on yourself and what you think you're losing right now, you will find yourself in a place of Egypt. Egypt didn't know what was about to hit it. They worshiped idol gods. They weren't listening to Moses. Pharaoh thought he was a god. He thought he was a god. He worshiped himself. Have you seen folks like that? They worship themselves, so guess what? They don't listen to nobody else. Who are you to tell me something? Have you ever seen that before? That's what happens when you have sniffed yourself enough. You begin to become intoxicated with the fumes of sniffing yourself, thinking you're all that in a bunch of Coca-Cola. You think you're all that, so I don't need to listen to you, Moses, because I've made it this far on my own. I don't need to hear you, Moses, because God has protected me this far. Why do I need to listen to you, Moses? Because I've seen my brothers die left and right as they were working and doing things for Egypt, but I'm still standing. Why do I need to hear these instructions from you on this night? That I must do some things I have never had to do before, things that seem obscene, things that seem crazy. Why should I listen to you? Because God is doing a new thing. God is doing a new thing. And if you say you believe in God, if you say you hear from God, then you got to be willing to shift with God. The shifting may require us to leave out of our comfort zone that we built for ourselves. He may have blessed us for a certain time, but then he's taking us away from that stuff to something better, which means that we have to give up that one moment in our lives. Will we trust carnal nature, or will we trust the Spirit of the living God who has always protected us? Brothers and sisters, God does not want his children to be fragile. He doesn't want you to be fearful of every carnal thing that you hear and see, because he says, my power overcomes everything that you see. I need you to see me. So they listened. They listened. And the Israelites were able to survive. What does the text say to us today? What must we do? We must lean not on our own understanding. God is shifting and has always shifted. When you think you know where he's going, he will shift. Brothers and sisters, I believe some folks have been left behind in a shift because they don't want to give up what they are used to. God is saying, Egyptians were left in the dust, and they lost something that they treasured the most, the firstborn males, and even their property. They lost their prized possessions. They lost their calves and all of this stuff. And then on top of that, they lost the people who was building the things they worshiped. They lost everything because they sniffed themselves and believed the hype. And those who were oppressed gained everything because they were willing to sacrifice for one night and honor the instructions of God to do something they had never done before, and to experience something for 400 years they have never experienced before: physical freedom. In this moment in time, brothers and sisters, God says this: trust him. God says, I am God. I am that I am. Man, you got to be a bad God. You got to, and bad, not in bad terms. I'm talking about a good God, but you got to be bad when you know your name is just, I am that I am. I do what I want to do, and what I do and what I say I'm going to do is going to come to pass. I speak it, and it might take 5,000 years, but it's going to come around. That's a bad God. Boy, talking about some power. The power to speak some things that many of us will never see, but our descendants will see them. That's the kind of God that I want to serve. That's a God who walks around, I'm good. Everything I created is good. I'm so good, I created everything in 6 days. I could have done it in 5. I could have done it in 1. It was so good, I wanted to do something even better. I wanted to outdo myself. I created a man. I created the beasts of the sea and the fowl of the air. I did all this stuff. And then I created that man, and I looked at that man and said, man, I made a mistake with that man. I need to create a woman. He said, man just wasn't perfect yet because he needed that woman to complete him. See, God is so good that we got to understand that he knows what's best for us. I think of Romans 8:28, that all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord, those who are called according to his purpose. I can just imagine for the Israelites on that night, they didn't know how all this stuff was going to work out for their good. And you mean 400 years is going to culminate in one night? My ancestors have been in bondage for 400 years. So it's probably got to take another 400 years for me to be set free. That's carnal thinking. But God shows you, yes, you've had 400 years of bondage, but I can take care of it in one night. Doesn't seem logical. We've suffered this long, so it must going to take a little longer for us to be set free. So in the meantime, Moses, I don't know what you're talking about. Moses, I think you're smoking something. Moses, how are we going to be able to be set free in one night just by staying in our houses? I think you're trying to keep me from my life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But truly, you don't have any life and liberty and happiness because you're in an oppressive society that's been beating you down. God says, trust me and watch what I do in one night. Oh, that's the kind of God we serve. You might have been sick for 12 years, and in 1 minute you can be healed. You might have seen somebody who suffered for a long time. You might have seen a marriage that's been broken for many, many years, and in one instant, the move of the Holy Spirit can right the ship. That's the God we serve. That's the God we serve. He says, all I need is for people to follow my instructions, obey my commands. That's work. You do it because you believe what he says. That's faith. You act on it, that's work. If we just do the work and not faith, it's dead. But if we have faith in what he says and do what he says, now that's life. So the Israelites had life. They obeyed. They sacrificed. Ooh, we don't like sacrifice around here, do we? Sacrifice is uncomfortable. You're not going to take away my life and liberty. I got to sacrifice for you?
Inspired to support By God Inspired Ministry with your gift to BGI, we'll also send you a signed copy of Pastor Vincent J. McCaskill's inspiring book, Healing from Lies Seen as Truth, Learning to Listen and Hear God. We've made giving simple through our text to give number, 901-244-4688. That's 901-244-4688. Enter the amount and follow the prompts. And here are other ways you can ensure BGI receives your tax-deductible contribution.